This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, a continuity of business solution for industries that struggle with traditional banking. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, we're talking to Tron Black. He is infamous or famous in cryptocurrency circles for his amazing entrances to conferences and meetups. So I'd like to say, welcome, Tron. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you.
So, the one thing that I will say is you know how to make an entrance. And before we get into anything, tell people a little bit about what does a Ravencoin entrance look like?
Initially it was sort of just one time I did it on the stage for a meetup internal to Overstock, and I put on the Raven mask and I rode in on a skateboard. It's a balancing one wheel skateboard. Anyway, I drive it between the office and the parking lot, and so I just roll across the stage, and so I kind of started doing that, and it was kind of fun. So I did it a few times, and then I've kind of done it at different venues and things. As long as I can get the board there, I'll try it. And then at one time I decided I was going to put the Guy Fawkes mask underneath it. So I take off the Raven mask and there's the Guy Fawkes mask underneath. And that was kind of a hit. So I've done that a couple of times.
It's fun. Yeah. And it's unexpected. And I think, all the conferences I've been to in my other, my real life outside of crypto, crypto conferences are always a little unique and sometimes there's some memorable things, and I have to admit that seeing you come, live to an event is probably one of the most memorable entrances I've ever seen being made. So I just think it's kind of fun.
Well, the first entrance is memorable for me because the Raven mask and the Guy Fawkes mask eye holes don't line up very well. So it's very, very, very hard to see. So I'm kind of navigating anyway, it's an adventure coming in.
Well, that at least you care. Like, there's some style to it. And I think that we need that because crypto's different. And so I think we should be different. Before we get into all the nuts and bolts of this, can you give the audience a little bit of a background about you and how did you kind of get into the crypto world?
Yep. So entrepreneur all my life, sold a couple companies to public companies. So that's what I did. I was working on some other stuff kind of related to home rentals and things like that, sort of a halfway between Airbnb and HomeAway kind of thing. And then found crypto in 2013, and I just really, really thought it was awesome. It just had kind of hit all the elements that I really liked, kind of the economics and the business part and money and the entrepreneurial and the programming. And I have a background, I have a computer science degree and an MBA, and so I kind of hit both of those. And I went down the rabbit hole kind of in 2013. There was some stuff happening in the world at the time, the Cyprus event where they basically closed the bank doors and then wouldn't give back all the money. We're basically taking money away. And before they opened the doors up, and there was kind of people rattling the gates and things, like we were pretty upset. And it also kind of woke people up to the fact that the money that you deposit is sort of not yours anymore. And that changed people's mentality and how they think of money. And so that was kind of happening at the same time. Because of that, that's how the Bitcoin kind of came back into people's consciousness, because they're like, well, Bitcoin's the solution to this. You're kind of holding your own money. And so because of those events, because all of a sudden Bitcoin was being talked about in that context, and then just because the technology was so amazing, that's how I found it. And then just went down the rabbit hole. You hear about this from other people, started reading about it, studying, couldn't get enough of it. Now there's avalanches of information. At the time, you kind of had to try to grab and find more information. Now there's avalanches of information. But anyway, that's kind of how it started for me.
And so currently you're employed with Medici Ventures,
Yep.
which is a partial subsidiary of Overstock, or is it a wholly owned subsidiary of Overstock?
So Medici's wholly owned by Overstock, and it's a division of Overstock that does investment in blockchain projects that fit into 6 categories, mostly related around capital markets and banking and identity and voting, things like that, things that they identified as kind of helpful to, so it wasn't just like a scattershot thing, it was actually kind of a planned thing to invest in certain categories. From that, now we're actually working on some tech stack for civilization. So taking these things that would work for any country, money and banking and voting and things like that, and kind of building a system that would allow a country to kind of leapfrog and kind of skip kind of in the same way that some countries have kind of skipped landlines and went straight to cellular.
Like most of Europe.
Yeah, so you could kind of skip crappy banking and then kind of jump to kind of trustworthy, transparent banking. And so that's kind of what's on the table at the moment. So I work for Medici Ventures. I'm a principal developer for that, and then also got the opportunity to be able to work on this Ravencoin project. So that's what I've been doing for.
So there we get into the meat of things. So what is Ravencoin? What is this? There's so many cryptos out there. There's so many crypto projects out there, all wanting to be X, Y, and Z. What is the purpose of Ravencoin?
Yep. So the purpose of Ravencoin, try to keep it really short. It's basically the ability to create your own token, your own asset or token on top of a secure chain. And then with that comes some other things like messaging, the ability to talk to the holders of your token, voting, which is the ability for your token holders to vote on things, and the ability to remunerate, reward, or dividend to your token holders. So that's the core set. This was being built on top of a platform that we needed to make secure. So we started with Bitcoin as the base, created a cryptocurrency that acts a lot like Bitcoin, meaning it has its own value, it trades, it's out there, it's not a security, it's already trading on Binance, Bittrex. You can buy it from Vertbase, you can get Bitcoin from Coinbase and trade it for Ravencoin. So that's a token, that's a currency, and then we needed that first. And so we had that was built, that was started on January 3rd of 2018, that ran. It's got a value, it's on trading engines and things like that. So once we had that as the base, now we had the ability to create an asset layer. The asset layer is a technology that lets you create your own token. So you can just go on to Ravencoin. You need to have 500 Raven to do this, but you just basically say, I want a token named this is how many I want 1 million of them. And you can say whether it's reissuable, you can choose different things like that. And then boom, you have those tokens. Now, those tokens typically will have no value to begin with, so it's really up to you to give them a value. They might be representative of hours of your time, or they could represent share of something. They could be, kind of like prepaid gift cards, Sky Miles. I mean, those anything you want them to be. It's up to you to give them a value. But you have the tokens, and they trade and move just like Bitcoin moves, meaning they're counterfeit proof, and they move, worldwide, in seconds or minutes. So that's really what it is. So you can create your own token. And I think people have created now 19,000 plus tokens. So, that some of them are, just cyber squatting on the names, and some people are using for actual real projects, things like that. So.
Well, that sounds to me a lot like what there are some other platforms doing, that where you can build a token that rides on another blockchain, like EOS and Ethereum and things like that. How would you say is kind of Raven different in that and from that perspective?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the EOS one to talk intelligently about that, but I can talk about the ERC20 token, which is the smart contract that allows you to create your own token
right
on top of Ethereum. There's the identifying characteristic, that is a big, long 40 character thing. So that's your contract ID, etc. Multiple people could create one with the same name that you create. So because there's nothing kind of, they're not aware of each other. So there's no way to kind of get a unique name and things like that. So one of the things that I would call a differentiator is just that you get to choose your own name. So a unique name that no one else can choose. And you get to, they're just easier to use, right? We have a wallet for iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, Mac, and web. And so with all those 6 platforms, you can just move those tokens back and forth really easily. It shows up on just with the name without having to worry about contract IDs and things like that. So it's just a little bit easier to use, actually quite a bit easier to use.
So it's like it's human readable.
Yeah, it's human readable. It's just a name,
domain names, kind of? Would that be like that kind of?
A lot like domain names, and I think that's one of the reasons people created so many assets currently. Is they're hoping that they get used for real projects, but they aren't necessarily going to use them. And then there are other ones that have been created for real projects that they're actually doing things with them currently. So, and there's a Raven wiki that kind of talks about the real projects that are out there.
So you've just created a whole new domain or industry, but on a blockchain.
Kind of, yeah. And there are people out that have kind of grabbed, desirable names or whatever, so that they, for potential resale. Still a lot of good names out there if that's your thing.
So do you know of any projects, that have, on the like Raven assets that are also being traded, much like an ERC20 token is on an exchange? Do you know of any Ravencoin assets that are also trading and have created that value?
Not yet trading on like a trading platform. One of the reasons for that, even the ones that were issued under ERC20, a lot of them have been taken off of the trading platforms just because for legal reasons. If you create an asset that represents a share of a company or something like that, or something that isn't built, if it's a share of your time, that's great. If it's a prepaid gift card for something, those are fine. But if you say, hey, this represents 1/1,000,000th of my of my enterprise and that kind of thing, there's a lot of laws and rules and regulations. And while someone can do it in various different countries, to be able to trade it, you have to have a trading platform that's regulated. And there aren't very many of those yet. So,
are there any yet?
I don't think ones I don't think there's any yet that are legally trading in the U.S. or interacting with U.S. citizens. Yeah, at least ones that. Let me clarify. That gets a little more complicated because there are ones that are doing it that don't need bank account, so they're outside the U.S. So they're outside the long arm, and they don't need connection to a U.S. bank account, and so they're able to kind of operate that way. But ones that need to trade with dollars and things like that, they're not allowed to.
So does Ravencoin figure in with tzero or the tzero platform in any way?
Hopefully.
Could you expand on that? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. I just can't expand on it.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I think I lost your audio. Okay, so that would be interesting to know, because I know that tzero is coming out with a security token platform. So if you can't go in any of the proprietary or internal, strategy, I understand. But is tzero operating now? Are they open for business?
So tzero has its own token. That's out there now, sold to accredited investors that is currently trading. Yes. Yep.
Have they launched any businesses that you know of on their platform yet? Isn't that the point? They're supposed to be a regulated securities trading exchange.
There's a whole bunch of legal stuff that's kind of still being worked out. So once that gets worked out, that's part of the plan.
I think that's going to be exciting when that comes to fruition. But I think in a lot of the things, I mean, we could segue in a little bit about where we are in the crypto world right now with regulation and things like that. I read, some people think that we're still in crypto winter. Some people think crypto winter is going to end and we're in crypto spring or what have you. Where do you think we are in the crypto world right now as far as the regulatory environment? And where do you see the future for Ravencoin as that regulatory environment kind of starts unfolding and getting more, I guess, on more stable ground? Right now, I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions out there.
There are a lot of unanswered questions. Actually, last week there was some guidance that came out that answered some of those questions, which is helpful. And before that, I think most people were relying on basically some talks that were given by some people from the SEC, and everybody's kind of just looking at those like an oracle. There was some guidance that was given recently, which is helpful. I think Ravencoin fits. So there's two parts, right? So there's Raven, the token, that acts like Bitcoin. That's kind of under different jurisdiction. It's sort of like, because it's not a security, it acts more like Bitcoin. It's really not under
it's like a commodity,
right? And then you have other tokens that you create, and depending on you create these tokens, depending on what the use case is. So you create a token, right? You create it the same way, whether it was going to be an equity or whether it was going to be a gift card. And so both of those tokens work the same from a technology standpoint. But one of them is like you're making basically a tokenized promise, or like almost an investment contract. Like, I'm going to build this, and then you're going to get some share of that. That's where you have to be really careful. If it's kind of just a kind of prepaid gift card, then I don't think it falls under those same rules. So it kind of depends on what the token's going to be and what rules it falls under. And I know it's kind of confusing, but the technology doesn't know the difference, right? It's a token, it's counterfeit proof, and it's moving. It's a ledger, right?
It's the people that's the problem.
The people, right? If we have these people, yeah. So for that reason, I think Ravencoin's kind of already being used for things now that aren't related to securities. Because of security rules and things like that, and kind of the requirement that when you do a security, that you have to know the people that are holding it, because it has a value, and so they basically say, hey, we need to know, the name of the person. We're adding new features coming up soon to Ravencoin called tags and restricted assets that will allow you to at least know that someone knows who this address belongs to. So that you can create a kind of a smaller ecosystem where it's like, yeah, we know who all the people are in this smaller ecosystem, and allow hopefully securities to be able to trade secondary market between those. So that's my hope, but it is just a technology. That same technology could be used to say, hey, I've got subscribers and I have these tokens, and I only want the tokens to move amongst subscribers that are paying me $10 a month. And it works for that just as well. So the technology, the Ravencoin technology underneath the protocol doesn't know what these tags are. It just knows that this token can only go into addresses that have a certain tag. And that's really all we're building. It's really this base layer, and then what people use that for and how they use that to kind of comply with the regulations. We're giving examples of the way it could be used, but it's really just a tool set.
I think that's pretty fascinating, because as the way you describe it, with actually offering Reg D type securities, they can only go to, accredited investors.
Right.
And then generally those accredited investors, if you're viewing it as like a paper security, would have to hold them, I believe, for a year before they can then trade them.
Yeah.
That sounds like that could work for the digital equivalent of that restricted security stamp that's common with paper securities.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, we put that in a paper and kind of suggested that, yeah, the Rule 144, where it's like a stock certificate with a legend, it says this person has to hold it. They can't really trade it. There's a couple reasons for that. Maybe they were issued later on and they're not registered for public shares, or it could be that this person who's holding it has so much control or influence, meaning they're C-level or president of the company, and so there's Rule 144, kind of restricts them from trading even after the year and things like that. So these tags can kind of help manage that kind of even kind of off chain, and allow the chain, so people are even holding them themselves, but they can only send to people that aren't restricted in addresses that are kind of fully allowed to move things. So hopefully the tool set is sufficient. Probably won't be sufficient for every regulation, every jurisdiction, but hopefully it's enough to be able to do kind of regular securities and restrict them enough to stay legal. That's the hope.
Well, I think this kind of technology is probably going to make a lot of sense going forward with new tokens and coins, if they ever come to the market. It's looking pretty clear that pretty much every ICO that was done that sold to Americans was illegal under the SEC's, rules.
Yeah.
And so for a variety of reasons, and I'm not giving a strong opinion one way or the other with those rules. I think some of them make sense, some of them don't necessarily make sense on how they're being applied. But I think that having that technology does, open the door once this world gets a little more, I would say, regulated. It already is regulated, but a little more concrete, I guess, from just a legal standpoint. I think sometimes the technology outpaces regulation.
Sure, it's way ahead. Yeah.
But I think it's pretty fascinating what you guys are doing, and I think it's interesting. You guys, with just not even a year and a half, but just over a year now, you guys with Raven, this project has turned out to be, you're better than a top 50 coin now. Last time I looked, you were in the 30s, which is an amazing, unprecedented rise, especially for a group. If I recall correctly, you guys didn't do an ICO. You weren't launched that way. So, but you're still, got a multi-$100 million market cap. What do you what do you owe that to? I mean, why do you think people are so excited about this project, say, over another token type project?
Yeah, it's precisely that. It was done differently. It wasn't an ICO. Super transparent. It's the community that's done most of it, right? The value is in the community, and having it just, they've embraced it. They've embraced kind of the method by which, so I don't think anybody wants to, people were buying in because the potential of 10x investments and things like that. But I don't think anybody wants to like give money to somebody just to make somebody else rich because they're holding a bunch. And so I think the transparency, the community, and some novel technical stuff that's in there. I mean, we're taking capabilities that were done, not new features, because the capabilities that are in there are pretty similar to Counterparty or Mastercoin, Omni, Open Assets. Those are very, very similar. They were clunky because they were a second layer on top of the base layer, and so you had to move a certain amount of Bitcoin with every asset or with every token. So there was some clunky stuff that we were able to remove because we were able to kind of put the two together and remove the clunkiness. So there is some technical innovations. I mean, we did a new mining algorithm, and we've done some actual things. The tags and restricted assets will be pretty unique. That's new. And then hopefully we can explain kind of how it's supposed to work for doing subscriptions and for legal compliant type stuff. To explain to people how they can use it as a tool set. But I think it's all of those things together and Bruce, Bruce Fenton, very well respected and connected in the crypto world. So that helped. And then Patrick also, Patrick's kind of early visionary in this space. And
Patrick Byrne,
yeah, was the first public company to accept Bitcoin, and so that was big, and so that's a lot respected from the community. And also kind of the visionary stuff he's doing with tzero. So kind of all of those things kind of together in this one project, I think, just helped it differentiate itself from maybe some of the other ICO type projects.
Well, one of the things that I've really been excited about, and it seems whatever the formula is that you guys got seems to be a force to be reckoned with out there. And I think that says a lot. But what I think is different is that even though in a lot of respects the project is being supported and encouraged by Medici Overstock, it's a completely open source community type project. So, there's like IBM and some of these other big corporations are doing, closed blockchains and private blockchain projects. You guys went the opposite direction, and I haven't heard myself of, big corporations doing this. How can the average developer out there who's excited about this project get involved with Ravencoin?
Yeah, so probably the best way is just ravencoin.org, go to the community and go to development, or go to the nest and see what you can do to help. We have a dev kit, which allows you to kind of connect kind of web-based projects to the Raven D, which is the daemon that runs and basically handles all the coins and assets. That's just something you run on the computer. It syncs with the chain. But then we have this dev kit that allows you to connect to the web and do issuance, sign transactions, find out the balances, all those things, interact with the actual blockchain. So the dev kit. The dev kit can use improvements, right? If there's stuff that the dev kit needs, you can actually submit stuff to the dev kit. If you find something that's missing, or if you want to test or help, or we'll probably do bounties. Again, we did bounties when we first released the assets to kind of make sure the stuff was secure. So if you're really hardcore, like to look for security holes, you can make money doing that. We did I think pay out 4 bounties for this last round that found actual issues that we were able to solve. Or build projects on top of it. So that's yeah.
Well, Tron Black, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.